This is Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. When I think about the critical issues facing Black and Brown residents in the St. Louis area, I often ask the questions: how did we get here? What's holding us back? And how do we progress? At 9 PBS, we want to deepen our understanding and change the narrative. Join me as I look for answers and discover solutions on today's podcast. Are we doing enough to address the mental health struggles in the Black community? And how did the pandemic do particular harm to Black teenagers? On this episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel, I sit down with licensed psychologist and Fulbright scholar Dr. Jameca Woody Cooper, who will explain why we need more Black psychologists in schools, especially Black men. We also discuss why the absence of community connection is having a detrimental effect on the development of all kids, especially Black children, and how to reverse the trend. That's next on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel on 9 PBS.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.
Welcome to another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. Thank you so much for joining me on this Emmy-nominated broadcast. And I will say that we did not win an Emmy, but we were still nominated. And I was just looking today, actually. You can order a plaque that notes your nomination for this regional Emmy. We're in the Mid-America Regional Emmy group, and so it is a regional Emmy. So, your girl's going to order that plaque. I want that plaque that says I was nominated because it is truly an honor to be nominated. One of my colleagues sent me a message on Facebook, and she said the competition is fierce, and so you should be very proud that you were nominated. And truly I am. This is an incredible team here at 9 PBS. So, and thank you for tuning in. Thank you for downloading the podcast, for liking the podcast, for being a subscriber as well. It's very easy. All you have to do is just hit the like button, and you can as well share this podcast. There's a little arrow. You hit share and then share it wherever. Share it to yourself. A lot of people share. They email it to themselves to save it for later. Download it for watching later. But do become a subscriber. Our new season is going to start January 2025. And so we will be doing some things a little differently. Some things will be the same, great conversations, great exploration of the issues that impact the Black and Brown community in the St. Louis region. But we will be doing some new things. So you really want to become a subscriber ahead of time. And we thank you so much for tuning in. And before we get started with our guest, Dr. Cooper, who's in studio with us, I wanted to say that if anyone is watching or listening, or if you know someone who is in crisis right now, maybe you're overwhelmed, maybe they are depressed, please call 988, the Suicide and Crisis Line. It's answered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Or give your friend, your family member that number to call. A trained counselor will be there to help you. So here's the deal. If you are struggling, it is okay to express your feelings. It's okay to share your feelings. Please do not any longer keep that to yourself. 988 is there, and someone is on the other side of that line to answer your call. I start there for obvious reasons because of the conversation we're going to have today with our esteemed guest. We've talked before. I've interviewed her before. We've admired each other from afar before. I will show you this. I clipped this out of the St. Louis American newspaper. Well, I don't know how many years ago, she knows. And I kept it all this time because I wanted to have her on the podcast. And one reason, there are many, but one reason is because 9 PBS has a mental well-being initiative, and we work with a network of trusted partners to support the day-to-day social, emotional, and cognitive needs of children from infancy to 8 years old, and to support people in their lives through culturally relevant content and resources that promote what many call courageous conversations. If you call 988, for instance, you're about to have a courageous conversation. Sharing your feelings takes courage. To talk to someone else about what they are going through or what you are going through does, in fact, take courage. And you are watching right now, and you may not think that you are courageous at all, but you actually are. To say, I'm hurting right now. I've been sad for a long time right now. Just saying the words takes courage. And so we at 9PBS want to support you in the community because our mental well-being initiative is meaningful to us because we know it makes the community whole, and you all deserve that indeed. Dr. Cooper, I cannot tell you how excited I am to have you in studio.
I'm excited to be here.
Yay, indeed, indeed. We're going to talk about this Fulbright scholar. She's the president of at least one organization I know about, and I want to talk to her about that as well. But you are doing great work. How did you come to this career in the first place?
Well, that's a really good question. Well, I attended HBCU, Tougaloo College in Jackson, Mississippi.
All right.
And before I started Tougaloo, I was on the path. I was a biology pre-med major until I did a nice little summer program and realized I fainted at the sight of blood.
That'll do it.
I had to do a bit of a detour. And so I started taking classes. Like, that was my junior year of college. And then I found psychology and kind of ended up in it that way. And then kind of moving into St. Louis after graduate school, my career has now taken a different turn, more social justice things, more trauma, and now like criminal legal activities too. Again, not something I planned, but things just kind of unfolded, and the need was there, so I ended up doing a lot of these things.
And a part of the need is what you spelled out in this article that was in the American. Black psychologists are absent in public schools, and you make note in the article, the Census Bureau says 82% of psychologists in the United States are white, only 5% are black, and if we then talk about black men, it is 1%.
Yes.
Why is that even a necessary thing to focus on?
Because when we think about black students in schools, K through 12, they're going to get the best help from people that look like them. Plain and simple. Not because other people don't care or because other people don't recognize their issues, but we see them for who they are, and we don't often have those same biases and stereotypes. So it's easier to understand where they're coming from or their issues and help them in a unbiased and a fair way.
We have had, because, as I mentioned, the 9PBS Mental Wellbeing Initiative, and because I have a husband and sons, all of whom are black, and because we have dealt with anxiety and depression with our children, it is front and center in my life. And we have had Black Men Read, the Village Path, which I'm sure you know them. They are both social workers. One of them I want to bring up because you mentioned it's not because they don't care. Speaking of Caucasian psychologists, but one of them from the Village Path made the comment that when he was in his graduate work, someone in the class said it was a good thing, made a comment that it was a good thing that gentrification was happening, that more white people were moving in. And he felt hurt, offended, wasn't quite sure how to express himself, but it added to his anxiety about being in this field as a black person. Mm-hmm. And I only bring that story up. You can go back and watch that podcast. It is remarkable. The Village Path is the name of the group, focusing on black men healing. Mm-hmm. But I bring that up because there is apathy. And bias can, unchecked, turn into apathy and uncaring.
Yes. And it's a lot of it. It's a lot of it. I see it because I've been in the field over 20 years. So I know like what the training consists of for us as psychologists, what that looks like. And unfortunately, a lot of the training that's necessary, people just won't do, because you can read things in a book, you can role play, you can do things in a controlled environment, but it's very different when you get out in the community. It's very different when people present a different way. When you've read in a textbook that anxiety looks like this, but then the person sitting in front of you is doing something else, and you're like, uh-oh, I don't know what that is. I can't relate to that. I can't relate to how they present. Because, as African Americans, we're very dramatic. We speak
Demonstrative.
with our hands.
Yeah.
We're emotional and we're loud. And for other people, that's seen as aggressive. Off-putting. So they're not always comfortable working with us, especially in the ways that we need to be worked with.
And you just said, Dr. Cooper, that there are classes that you can take, but they're not being taken?
Well, there are classes that are mandatory for all psychologists
Right.
taking their training. And if you take all those, you will have knowledge of working with certain groups of people. Having knowledge of working with certain groups of people is very different than working with groups of people in person. Going in their home, seeing what their families are like, being willing to sit with them through a range of emotions. Mm-hmm. Not just happy, but angry, rage, like afraid. It's very difficult for people to do that unless they come from some of those places.
So therein lies the need to have more psychologists to fit the demographic.
Yes, if possible.
If possible. Or those who don't fit the demographic being better trained.
Way better trained. And the training looks different than people want it to look. Because there are a lot of white counselors, therapists out there that they read in a book, they go take a continuing ed professional development workshop, they meet with a colleague and discuss things. But can you go sit with a family, a black family, and help them with their children? Can you go to their homes if you need to? Can you meet them in the community somewhere? Because sometimes that's what it takes when the access is not there, when
Right.
transportation is not an option. There's just so many things that come with it, and lots of people aren't willing to do that.
I am so reminded, and I knew, I have like 20 pages of notes here, and I knew that she was going to say many things that were going to be off my notes, which is great, I'm reminded of a colleague telling me maybe 3 months ago, actually it was in February, that she was dealing with an HR issue, and the HR professional was dealing with a black manager, and she described the black manager as aggressive. And my friend, my colleague, spoke to the black manager, and she found out the black manager was having a family crisis. Her child was having trouble in school, and she was afraid for her child. Now, she as a black woman saw this and could evaluate, okay, what I see is fear. I don't see anger. I see fear. But the white HR professional just labeled her as aggressive and was unwilling to dig deeper.
And I know what that's like. You've probably had experiences like that. I've been called aggressive many, many, many times in graduate school, outside of graduate school, in training, outside of training. And I'm like, And now in a training situation or school, I then have to confront it head on. Like, what do you mean? What is that?
Right.
Blah, blah, blah. And usually with us, we're not aggressive at all, but how we express our emotions is very different. How we express frustration can look aggressive to other people who are not familiar with that. And of course, we're used to it. That's how our mothers, our aunts,
Right.
everybody.
What you're not going to do.
Right. And it's not, and that doesn't mean we want to fight you.
No.
It just means we're moving our head when
We're
we
firm.
talk.
We're
Yes.
firm. Yeah.
We're emotional. And if you're afraid of something, you should have some intense emotions. If you're angry, you should show emotions. It's just that the world doesn't give us a safe place to express our emotions in the way that we feel comfortable.
And this is about black psychologists. This is about the needs of youth in school settings, black youth in schools, and not just urban, but suburban. And we can talk about the differences there. But the National Council on Mental Wellbeing, behind 988, of course, has a tagline, Healthy Minds, Strong Communities. And to that, Dr. Cooper, just a broad question, it would seem that because of social media, because of what we see, and we see far too much negativity, the broad question is how unhealthy are our youth, our black youth in urban settings today, and suburban is a separate issue?
I think our black youth are extremely unhealthy. I think youth, the whole demographic of young people in this country,
No matter the ethnicity.
No matter the ethnicity, they're extremely unhealthy psychologically. And that's one of the things I think the Surgeon General stated recently, like this is the public health crisis of our lifetime. Our youth are struggling. They're way sicker mentally than previous generations would have ever be. And then we have to sit and think about why that is. And I think in this country, we're so used to, okay, let's fix it. Let's do this.
Here's a pill.
Yes.
Yeah.
But how about we just prevent it? That's easier. But no one wants to put the time and effort into that.
And maybe it's more expensive, but maybe it's expensive, but it feels more expensive to let it go. So when you talk about the Surgeon General, the study that came out some months ago, and I think just studied female students during the pandemic, but found that the thinning of the cortex resembled that happens naturally as we age, but it was sped up in the isolation and the stress of the pandemic.
The pandemic was extremely stressful for everybody. Like we all remember,
right.
like there's so much uncertainty. Humans don't deal well with uncertainty. And we had a lot of it for a long period of time. So as adults, we see the suffering, but I don't think we were prepared, nor did we handle well the psychological stress of that on young people, because they were struggling before the pandemic. They were struggling socially, psychologically, just based on lots of different factors. Then the pandemic hit. It really set them back. They haven't recovered. That generation, they're still recovering. They're still struggling with stress, with social issues, just a lot of the basic skills I think like Generation X and previous generations had at younger ages. They don't have those skills.
And when I heard that report, excuse me, I automatically thought, okay, that's what female students are going through. There was no delineation of demographic in the study, in the report I heard. But I immediately wondered, well, who said that if America catches a cold, Black America gets pneumonia or something like that, totally paraphrasing. But I wondered, what about Black students, many of whom school districts just lost? Like, we don't know where they are. They're not showing up with their laptops. They're not showing up in class. They're just gone. So for 2 years, students were not getting educated. So I wondered what happened. What did the isolation do to Black students, to Black children? And who is anybody studying that?
They could be, and I just don't know about it. But I know if we look
You're very hopeful. That was a very hopeful response.
I try to be. But anecdotally, I guess if we look at it, they just kind of fell through the cracks. And in a lot of communities, the resources that are present in school systems are the resources that some Black students wouldn't get otherwise, whether that's meals, support, encouragement, structure.
Consistency?
Yes.
Structure, yeah.
So then when you take that away, then they're kind of left to their own resources at home or being neglected at home. And then they're definitely going to fall through the cracks.
So before the pandemic, we're already struggling. Far too many Black students are already under-resourced.
Yes.
So then the pandemic happens, and forget cracks, you fell off the cliff.
Fell off the cliff. In so many ways, that's what's happened to the youth all over the country, but then Black students in particular. And when they looked at the data in 2019, which was right before the pandemic, they saw that suicide was one of the leading causes of death for youth ages like 15 through 24, Black youth.
And we had never, so two things. When the pandemic happened, you'll remember this as well, that certainly on social media, because the media was showing the face of COVID as a elderly white person, people on social media were like, finally, we escaped something. And then
it hit.
Like 4 hours later, that's what it felt like the next day.
We were sick.
Yeah.
So people, social media plays a really big role in all of this, but definitely the numbers. Now, what the recent numbers say when they look at data from 2021 to 2023 for Black youth, they see the attempted suicide numbers that have decreased.
And that is from 2023?
2021 through 2023.
Okay.
So that's a good thing. So that means we're at least heading in the right direction, but we have a long way to go. And
so do we know why there was that increase?
I speculate that the increase has to do with a lot of different things. Because when they look at studies of Black youth, like how Black youth get help for psychological issues, 600% of them are more likely to get help in academic settings.
Oh,
So
not in clinical settings.
right. So if you take that setting away, they no longer have opportunities to seek help, or they feel that they don't have opportunities. So maybe it's the stigma that their family, because so many people over the country, still lots of Black people don't
Right.
believe in mental health or therapy. So they might say, oh, nothing's wrong with you, just sleep it off, or
Pray it away. Mm-hmm. Which we know full well that more Black churches are moving in the direction of, yes, the Lord, prayer, and get yourself some therapy.
right, because you can have both. You can have Jesus and a therapist. Mm-hmm. And I'm glad to see a lot of more people supporting that. But there's
still a stigma.
Still a stigma. So youth might not feel comfortable trying to tell their parents or guardians that they need to talk to someone.
So it's so interesting that my husband and I have two sons, and one is like me. He's outgoing. He's an extrovert. And the other, our oldest, is like my husband, introvert. And so we would joke that during the pandemic, he was like, hallelujah. And my husband was like, you mean I never have to go in a store again? I can have groceries delivered. I can have gifts delivered. I never need to be around crowds again. Great.
Wonderful.
They loved it. So I get that for them, that those of us, now I was still going in because I was a news anchor. I was still going into the newsroom. But it was isolating. I remember, honestly, it felt like tumbleweeds blowing through downtown. And it was scary as well, and not just isolating. But introverts kind of loved it. Extroverts, what does isolation do from a psychological standpoint to us? Why is it so harmful?
Well, like you said, for introverts, isolation, they thrive on it because it gives them more control and more order in their life. They can now organize their thoughts and plan their lives all in their world that goes on kind of here. But as extroverts, we need people, we need movement, we need energy. And when you bring in that isolation from that, it really can impact your mental health. It can make you more depressed. It can throw off your sleep. It can make you more like helpless, more hopeless about what's going to change. It can give you anxiety. Mm-hmm. Even some people thrive so much on human contact and conversation that without it, they're like, now what? They need to be able to talk through their thoughts and topics. And without that, that can be damaging if you're an extrovert.
Right.
Introverts, like you said, my husband was an introvert too. He loved it. He was like, this could go on years.
Yeah.
And meanwhile, I was like, no, it cannot.
No, it cannot, sir.
No, I need people.
I am with you. And yet then the question becomes for Black youth who, as we mentioned, were getting what they were getting, being fed and finding structure away from maybe what could be a chaotic personal situation. Mm-hmm. There was safety in school. To not have that, what did that? We're still figuring it out.
We're still figuring it out, and if we go back before the pandemic, young people were still figuring it out then because you throw in the internet, which we all thought would be so wonderful when it came. Oh, look at what you can do on it. You find information, and it is. But then you throw in social media, and the young people actually think that they're part of a community and that they get support that way. Mm-hmm. But in reality,
a bunch of strangers.
Yeah, it's not the type of support that is going to be advantageous to you, throughout your life. You may be able to say something, they respond, but that's not the type of support that gets you through difficult times.
You speak a lot. I want to talk about your not your podcast, but your TED Talk that you did, and y'all hang on, because the first line of her TED Talk, I was like, pause, let me write that down. But you focus a lot on peer connections, and I had to Google, like, okay, that sounds like just a standard thing. We connect with our peers, but it's meaningful in building community and a sense of belonging, but clearly it's not happening. Why is it so important? And what does the result of its absence mean for Black youth?
Well, connection, support, interaction is important because it makes you feel seen and heard. Everyone wants, it doesn't matter how old you are, what race you are, how much money you have. Everyone wants, and I remember Oprah saying this some years ago on her show, everyone wants to see the person's eyes light up when they walk in the room. You want to be acknowledged. And whether you're in middle school, elementary school, high school, even as adults, we want that, and we thrive on that. That's what makes us feel purpose and connection. Without that, you don't know where you fit. You don't know where you belong. Now, as adults, we've gone through those periods in life where we felt that before, but we know how to restructure, organize, and but children don't have those skills yet or the life experience. So it makes them feel invisible. It makes them feel worthless. It makes them feel not important, not good enough, or for girls, not pretty enough, not likable. And that damages their self-esteem, which then damages their mental health.
Which then opens them up to any number of negative influences, which then become negative behaviors.
Yes. And social media is one of those. While social media can be a great thing, it can be beneficial, like if you're searching for information, but usually young people are using it as a comparison. So this girl wears her hair like, everyone's wearing their hair like this, so what's wrong with me? They're living this great life, so what's wrong with me? And I always tell my children that I'm so glad that I grew up in a time that didn't have social media.
Oh, my goodness.
Because I didn't know what children in Paris and Russia were wearing. All I knew was what people in front of me were wearing.
And that was bad enough.
And that's enough. That's enough data.
We were comparing even then with her walking down the hallway. Did you see what she had in third hour? Right.
But that's only a handful of people versus thousands.
Right. I will never forget, Dr. Cooper. He's not my youngest son. They're both in their 20s, let me admit that we feel like we saw anxiety, but no one knew what we were looking at. Counselors, which is why what you're talking about, the presence, the need for the presence of not only Black psychologists, but especially Black male psychologists in the school setting is so important, because no one said to us, we think he has anxiety. And so now we know. But he just a breakdown emotional. Everybody has new clothes. I don't have new clothes. And I was looking around the room like, what are you talking about? You are the most stylish. Here's this and here's that. And he just had a complete meltdown because he felt like he did not measure up. And people had new things, and he didn't have those things, and I'm sure they were hot tears. You know, y'all who have ever had hot tears, you know what I'm talking about. But now I can see the anxiousness that was present in him in that moment, and I tried my best to comfort him. But back in the day, you had Big Mama, Grandma, aunties down the street. You went to church. The community was so different.
Very.
And it's so fractured now. And that then, in your estimation, makes connection even more difficult?
Yes, because we do live very independent but isolated lives as families. You think about like what the daily routine looks like. You go to work, you come home, you do homework, you do extracurriculars. If you have school-age children, they go in their room, they're on their That's it.
Yeah.
Like there's no real life.
Gerbil on a wheel. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not. So to your point, like the way I grew up, now I come from an extremely large family. I'll preface that. Like my grandmother had 16 children. So I had cousins after cousins after cousins. And
you were living in the same community.
Yes, most of us were. Most of my aunts and uncles lived in the same. So I saw a lot of my aunts and uncles and cousins daily. And that's 32 first cousins I had.
Wow.
So I saw a lot of them daily. Unannounced. That's because that's how we roll. But so I grew up with a sense of community in a small town, part of a family in a small town, and everyone knows everyone. So it's a different type of community, and you know that you matter, and you know where you fit in those situations. But without that,
you don't know.
You're just kind of floundering. You don't know where you fit, and they're trying to figure it out. But now you throw in social media where now they feel like they really don't measure up.
Right.
And it's just a recipe for disaster.
Absolutely.
And then we haven't provided this support in the schools for them.
I will say that we have been members of our church for 20 years. And so my son to this day he had this one Sunday school teacher. I mean, he had there were a lot of people. A lot of mothers. I would say to him, "Do you see all these women here? They are all mothers, and I have told each of them that they have permission." Eyes big. Like, yes, I did. Yes, I did. So you have to build community, and I bring up my son in talking about peer connection because we're looking at something and we don't necessarily even know what we're seeing. And so for people watching, probably mostly adults, of course, but these are parents and grandparents, what are we looking for if someone is having a crisis, whether it's a financial crisis, we can determine that, but an emotional crisis?
And that's really hard for parents, which is also why it's important to have Black psychologists in schools, but also more Black therapists out in the community.
Yeah.
Because to a new therapist, to a non-person of color therapist, they could be in the room with a Black teenager that is anxious and not even know it. Because anxiety, yes, you can have sweating, heart racing, you can have panic symptoms, but you can also not. You can also
be stoic.
You can be stoic. You can be angry. You can be agitated. You can be also same with PTSD. You can startle easily, but you can also have explosive anger. Everything looks differently depending on where you're coming from. So
it's important then to know.
You have to know. But the only way you know those things is you know the people. You have to not just know what the book says. You have to know the communities and the demographics that you work with and what it looks like. If you've, like for me, I've done this over 20, I've seen it look all different ways. So I can sit and look at it and kind of turn my head. I'm like, I think that's this.
Right.
Even though all of my training might say, that's not this.
Right.
But I'm like, no, it's this. And then if I ask the right questions, I'll be like, oh, okay, I knew I was right.
I remember you're making me think of a court case in Missouri. The judge then said, when I saw he was a teen defendant, and the judge said, because he did not show what she judged to be regret or emotion that she felt would have been applicable to someone who felt like I shouldn't have done this, she gave him a tougher sentence. And then later realized, was trained maybe, read an article maybe, I don't know, but realized what she was actually looking at. And so let's then talk just specifically about Black youth. It might be explosive anger. It might be stoicism. They might be quiet and because they're trying to be tough.
That's all they know. Those are the role models that they have. It's normal in our community. Like, you have to appear confident and self-assured. But in front of a judge, that confidence looks like no remorse.
Right.
And when you just may be internally just trying to hold it together so your mom that's sitting behind you doesn't break down. But they don't see us in those same ways. Now, white teenagers or white young people, they see, oh, look at him. Oh, Johnny, oh, he's remorseful. Johnny might not show any remorse, but Johnny might not be as confident. So all of a sudden now he gets 10 years versus one of us, then we're going to get 20 or 30.
Right. That reminds me of the judge, the collegiate swimmer who raped a drunken girl by a dumpster, and the judge said in the case he has suffered enough. And I could feel my insides on my outside. I just exploded. I could not believe that a judge would say such a thing. So we are assessed more harshly. However, Dr. Cooper, we assess ourselves.
We do.
More harshly.
We do. I see that a lot too with young people. And I don't mean young people, I mean young adults, millennials as well. They're, even like when I'm dealing with women in therapy and they're like, oh, I'm into it with my girlfriend. Usually my first question to them is, you're going way harder on this person than you've gone on the man that you're laying up with.
My goodness, she said that.
So we do need to have a lot more grace and mercy for each other, because that's what we want. If you expect other people to have mercy and understanding, then you also have to extend it. But I think a lot of that is lost because I'm not sure that it's modeled in the same ways. Like the way that I saw growing up with my grandmother, like she's like a saint, like she did no wrong. And that's what I had to look toward. So I knew right from wrong. But I think a lot of younger generations, like some of these Gen Z, millennials are doing the same things their parents. Like they can't look to their parents to help them sort out emotions because their parents are acting out more than they are.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of role models and appropriate behaviors that have been lost.
And sticking with the why peer connection is so important, that I remember reading that this is how students develop the skill of working with one another, skills of listening and of leadership. And so we don't have Big Mama or Big Mama's acting out herself because she's a 35-year-old grandmother, right? So we are generalizing, by the way. This is not
Very
all
much.
Black people.
No.
Okay. But we are speaking to the not the fringes, but those who are in most need,
Right.
is who we're speaking to and speaking about. But so you don't have that community, familial community, nor community. So now you're not developing leadership and the ability to work with one another.
Social skills, conflict resolution.
Mm-hmm.
And what this Generation Z has, by and large, you see it all over, is they have low frustration tolerance.
Girl, is that why we're in line and we are pitching a fit? I go to
Yes.
get my nails done. There's a woman sitting next to me. Two women are upset because they think someone has gone ahead of them. This is about our nails.
Yes, it's not life or death.
It's
not
not
food.
life or death, but one of them says, "Don't let me go to my car." And I thought, do I need to?
I'm not going to be able to get my nails done today.
Are we about to shoot up the nail shop over
And will.
and have? Mm-hmm. So that is a low tolerance. How did you describe?
Low frustration tolerance.
Low frustration tolerance.
It's been research done on it. This younger generation has it a lot. It's quite prevalent. So we see that impacts mental health, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Because there are going to be some times when you're learning a new skill like math, you're going to be frustrated. You can't get it, and you're like, "Why can't I get it? Why is everybody?" You have to be able to. You learn. That's what teachers and parents used to teach us, how to sit in that discomfort while we work through the problems.
But if you see your mother going off at the Dollar General, then you don't even know how to resolve.
You have no bearing for
You have
even
no
what that
bearing.
looks like.
Yeah.
So that's a big part of emotional regulation too. So if you can't tolerate being uncomfortable, there's just a lot of things in life you won't be able to tolerate.
How about everything?
Yes. I tell my sons that all the time. I'm like, if you think your life is bad now at 21, buckle up because you don't have any bills. It gets no easier and better than it is now.
Listen, my son just texted me, the landlord said, there's confusion over, as I sent him a word from our pastor about consistency in chaos was the title. Bishop G. Vincent Dudley Sr., who has been a guest on this podcast. Please go watch that. Consistency in chaos and how to handle what feels like a chaotic world. And so I sent that to my son, and his response was, the landlord is confused about how much I owe. And I said, well, here's the questions I would ask. I said, add your questions and ask them to give you clarity.
Because we have to teach young people how to deal with conflict, how to work out situations, how to problem solve. It's okay if you're frustrated, but you're still going to do it because I'm not doing it for you.
Right. Yeah, I can't do it for you.
Yes, I need you to be able to stand on your own. But so many parents aren't doing that because we have parents that it's the everybody gets a trophy generation. It's the parents are doing the homework. They don't want
the project, right? And
they
all of
don't
that.
want the children to ever feel frustration. That's a part of life and development.
I have so many stories. My sister-in-law is a retired teacher, 37 years, and I remember the evolution of her describing how parents would come. So and it's either parents not coming at all, so they're not even checking, they're not talking to the school, or parents coming and it's an argument. And my baby did not. We're elementary school. She was a third grade teacher for the majority of her career. My baby didn't do that. My baby wouldn't do that. So that was an evolution that she saw over her nearly 40 years.
Wow.
So that's a part of the lack of being able to engage in conflict resolution. Because
And a lack of accountability.
There's that.
You have to really force your children. And I see parents having a really hard time with that. A really hard time with
Forcing their children to be
accountability.
accountable.
Like if your child does something, you know your child. You know your child. And instead of going to the teacher and saying this, you look at your child and be like, I know you did that. Or you probably did that. Or let's just talk about it as if you did that. And then we're going to work through now what happens.
Right,
as opposed to, oh, okay, you didn't. As soon as they say I didn't do it, you believe them. And this is a middle schooler.
Yeah. Or
that
third grader.
lies.
Or a third grader.
Yes. And they're trying to avoid consequences. You just have to, it's really easy for parents to sidestep those tasks in parenting because it's hard.
Because it's hard.
And it takes more work.
And we may, as parents, he may not have. They don't have peer connections. They didn't get it.
Yes.
Well, I heard in a therapist say that your parent in this case, or beloved spouse, cannot give you what they did not get.
Amen.
So if we're looking at disconnection in the Black community in an urban setting where poverty, far too much violence, addiction, over-policing, the stress level is high, how much is going right? Far more is going wrong. So people growing up in that level,
they don't have the skills.
right?
So, right, a person can't give you what they don't get, and a person can't give you what they don't have.
Right.
They're not capable. They can't deliver it to you because they have no conceptualization of what that is even
What
you
right
speak
even
of.
looks like.
Like when you
What
talked about,
calm even looks like.
like you talked about an example in a court case with a youth, the judge saying that he doesn't see regret. Like so many Black people don't even know what regret looks like. So a lot of times in therapy, I'll talk to my clients about emotion wheel. And these are all the range of emotions.
I've seen that, yes.
And then I'll ask questions like, what would regret look like? What would guilt look like if you were to, like, they don't know that. They've never seen it. No one has explained it to them. They don't even know. Like, so how would he even know to
But
show
they may
regret?
actually feel it, but they don't even know how to identify that.
Exactly.
Like, I'm mad that happened. I'm mad I did that. Like, but they skip past I'm mad I did that to I'm mad.
I'm just mad. It's
I'm just
blanket.
mad.
I'm
Right.
mad. When really it's disappointment.
Right.
But we don't tease out what the specifics are. And that's what helps children in development as well.
Okay. And so when we talk about school safety, for instance, because we're talking about what Black students need, the mental health needs of Black students, we will talk about school safety, but people think of school shootings. That's not necessarily the average school shooter's a Caucasian, a white male student. In urban settings, we're talking about fights. There are far too many fights. And I know that let me see, it's Jennings. I think it's Jennings has a youth commission. The city of Jennings has a youth commission, and they're focused on creating dialogue between teens and adults after one too many fights and some headlining fights and death in school. So the number of fights in school, I guess that's just a continuation of our conversation. People who do not know how to resolve conflict and how to avoid it in the first place.
So it's a conflict resolution. It's that low frustration tolerance. I'm mad at her. Okay, but do you have to hit her? I mean,
Right.
can you just be mad and deal with being mad or disappointed that the friendship ended or she lied on you? Are there
Right.
other ways to deal with it? So that's a part of it. But also the mental health. We're thinking about how that factors in. Like we're dealing with young people that have been traumatized in
Right.
one way or another, and they can't separate that. Like they bring the trauma with them to school. Mm-hmm. And then you bring in all these other instances with their peers, but that's also why we see the bullying numbers going up. Mm-hmm. And I always talk to adults that say, well, bullying has always been around. It's not. That's true.
But
That's
not
true.
like this.
Not like this. Not like this. It's at an all-time high, and it's risen. When they looked at the 2021-23 numbers, it's gone up some.
And does bullying look different in an urban setting than it does in a suburban setting?
I don't know how different it looks, but I do know when you add in technology,
Right.
I think they all share that. So it's not just in schools, but it's the cyberbullying. So internet, email,
Right.
Instagram, Snap, that's a factor. And that gives a whole nother option there for people who want to disrespect you or embarrass you.
Your TED Talk, is it 9 months ago, a year ago?
About a year ago.
About
yeah.
a year ago. The title was Understanding the Role of Community in School Gun Violence. And again, in an urban setting, we're talking about fights in school. People were bringing guns to school, but we do not often see, I can't remember the last time we saw a black student go into an urban school and killed 9 people or 3 or 4 people. But there are far too many fights in urban schools. But it was your first line that stopped me dead in my tracks. First line of this TED Talk was, are you unconsciously raising the next school shooter?
Because that was my title that they didn't use.
Oh.
That was my title.
Okay. They said that's too much.
Yes. I said, but that's the question.
Right.
I need to know that we need to understand how we're raising them.
Because somebody's raising them.
Right. It's not like they just are dropped out of the sky.
Right.
And no, they come from somewhere. Who do they come from and why?
And so if I take out school shooter, because that's not the black experience, if you will, but there are far too many illegal guns. There are shooters. So the question for us could be, are you raising the next shooter? Are you raising the next car thief? Are you and then again, we're talking about this is not all black people. Are you raising the next inmate?
And that's what's real.
Are you raising the next illiterate? Are you illiterate? Literacy is an issue, right? So what was your not conclusion, but what was your setup to are you raising the next school shooter?
I feel like there are factors and things that we need to pay attention to as a community, but as parents as well. Some of those things are not just watching your children, making sure they get to school and make sure they eat, but if they're staying in their room too much, that means something. If they're not talking to you, if they stop doing things they used to do and they don't do it, that means something. So there are all different signals and signs we need to pay attention to. But also, I think one of the biggest issues that contributes to the violence in schools and the violence in communities is the lack of connection and the lack of community. Because growing up, we used to feel like I'm not going to hurt this person because they're a part of me. They're a part of my circle.
We were connected.
But now we don't have that. So we really see people as opposition, as strangers, as a threat. And when you see people as opposition, it's very easy to retaliate and to hurt and injure them or kill them. So we've lost that somewhere as a country. And then if we've lost that as a community. And we have to get it back somewhere. Because if we don't, we'll just see this continue. It'll just get worse and worse and worse.
I actually saw St. Louis Mayor Jones, Tashara Jones, and the police chief, this might have been a month ago, on Facebook posting videos that said going back, this is 40 years ago, 50 years ago. It's 10 o'clock. Do you know where your kids are? They posted, I don't know how regularly they do it, but I saw it over the course of a couple of days. And your question is to parents. Now, I had a teacher on this podcast who was attacked by a student, and she said that these parents are in trouble. They are in trouble. And she said the kids, her words, our babies need help, and parents need help. And so if we were to, you ask that question in your TED Talk, are you unconsciously raising the next school shooter? And we ask on this podcast right now, this particular program, are you raising the next inmate? Yes. I would also ask, are you raising the next CPA? Are you raising the next millionaire? Are you raising the next fantastic husband? Because let me tell you, my goal was I'm raising some husbands up in here.
Yes.
I don't care what you do for a living, but you're going to be a good husband.
Yes.
So I will ask those positive questions as well as the difficult ones. But so we're talking about parents who are so in trouble.
Yes.
Who are we to expect them to raise some well-developed, well-mannered child, and they are in trauma? They have been molested. They have been unjustly arrested. They spent a weekend in jail. They have not gotten a raise. They've been discriminated. How are we to expect that set of parents to do some amazing job? Who are we?
It's very difficult, especially when you lack community. Because if you have community, you're going through all of that, but you got this person who's going to carry some of your weight.
Yeah.
But now we don't have any of that. Everybody is every man for himself. That you're not willing to help your neighbor, do all of that. Borrowing bread. And I remember growing up, I would have everything for my sandwich and would go right next door and ask them for the cheese.
Oh, my. And it's probably your auntie. Because you had a big family.
It was just a neighbor. I knew she had
Yeah.
it. So I went, and no one would ever do that now. Like, my kids would just be like, oh, I would never ask them. Okay, well, go without the cheese then. It's just this whole, the ability to connect, to speak to other people, to develop a relationship with them is foreign. They only want to text. They only want to do social media. That's lacking the skills, and this will continue to be perpetuated unless we change it. We have to make them have one-on-one conversations. We have to make them talk to us and explain their feelings.
But we, again, just let's take the black youth out of this. Let's just talk about we as adults who are the responsible ones. Unless we build, until we decide, I don't like it the way it is now, and how do I change it? But again, Dr. Cooper, am I expecting a woman who is in crisis herself, am I expecting her to have this thought, this clarity? I feel like that's wrong of me.
No, I think we should have those expectations.
Okay.
Because when I think about my parents and my grandparents who grew up sitting in the back of a buses, going to a movie at the top and a different interest, drinking out of different water fountains, that was stressful.
Yeah.
That damaged your self-esteem.
That was dangerous.
That exactly. You didn't know if you were coming home.
Right.
And
Today?
then when we compare it to now,
Yeah.
there are different types of stressors, still stress. But I think if they can maneuver that and still manage to be present in the lives of their children, then I think we can do it too.
We can do it. And I appreciate you telling me to, because I'm a glass is half full. You and I are both extroverts, optimistic people. I just want to be clear that we not have unrealistic, maybe that's what I'm saying, unrealistic expectations, but we need to have expectations. And one of those is our ancestors had it a lot worse.
A lot worse.
We
and they survived.
We have resources. We may not think we do, but you have. If you put $2 worth of gas in the car,
and now we have things exactly we can tap into it. We have websites, places you can go. You might not want them, you might not choose them, but they're there. And I think people also have to be accountable and get help for themselves.
What does it mean to be a Fulbright scholar, by the way?
You know,
and how does one become, not that I'm trying, but how did you become a Fulbright scholar?
Well, let's see. I applied and was selected based on my experience in like health, global health. And with that, I went to different countries and kind of helped them with projects based on what I had been working on at that time. When I went to Barbados, I trained like government officials, university officials on workplace health, mental health, and improving that and course development. But when I went to Kazakhstan, very interesting place.
I would imagine.
It's a country of Asian-looking people that speak Russian. Mostly, yeah. So it was very different, but they were extremely friendly and welcoming. So there I worked with them on suicide prevention because they were having increasing rates of suicide in their youth.
And what was the issue in Barbados?
In Barbados, it was just typical mental health in the government and them improving like their training methods and courses at the university.
Because we could look at my husband is from the Virgin Islands, and we could look at the Caribbean as maybe not having the level of health care or not focusing on mental health issues, mental wellness as we are, struggling with it.
They're not as upfront. They're not as outspoken about health and mental health. So they're a little behind where we are. So, of course, they don't have the same rates. But it's still an issue, just not as big of an issue as it is here.
Right. And you are you still the board president of the Missouri?
Yes, I'm the president.
Missouri Psychological Association. And I'm curious, does urban school mental health, is that on, and not that there's a platform, but is that one of the areas that you would focus on as president?
You know what? That's not one of our platforms this year. And mainly because it's a whole different organization that has school psychologists that runs their own thing. So in the Missouri Psychological Association, it's mostly clinical psychologists, research, counseling, forensic, more practicing or teaching based. The school psychologists kind of do their own thing, but we always work on mental health in schools in a global way. And we're trying to, at this point, just have more exposure for mental health. We work with like legal attorneys, training, like public defenders on how to make sure they know exactly what to do when they go in for cases. Other platforms we do are like rural mental health.
Which is real.
Yes. And the shortage, the access issues, like for people who live in rural areas in Missouri, even, it's huge.
Hospitals closing.
Yes.
Yeah.
When they looked at the numbers, I said, was that last year or the year before? All of the counties in Missouri, except St. Louis County, are deficient in mental health practitioners.
Meaning they have one or
They
none.
have a shortage. They don't have enough. And I think statewide, they said it would take a couple of thousand, I think, to get us up to what it needs to be.
Oh, my goodness. I remember, this is probably 30 years ago, even Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, which is where I was born. Then Senator Claire McCaskill identified that we have maybe one psychiatrist for the entire base.
Whoa.
Maybe one, and maybe I think that was the number. It was either one or two or three, and you needed far more than that for a base of tens of thousands of people. And so the military, a military base in the state of Missouri doesn't have it. Rural America doesn't have it. Urban Black youth don't have it, meaning none of us have what we need.
No one. And it's sad because you can't increase the numbers until you get people in schools,
Right.
out of schools, trained and ready to go. And it just isn't happening. The pipelines aren't there for now, especially for people of color, for therapists of color. Just we have a shortage in them in St. Louis. Definitely all over the country, though, really.
And so two questions. One is how do you increase? Because I know that's a part of your focus, how to get more, because that's what the meaning of the whole article, getting more people of color and especially Black men to become psychologists. But with the Missouri Psychological Association, you mentioned clinical. Does that mean I could petition that you guys need to study what the pandemic did to Black youth? Is that who I would pitch?
It will probably be APA, the American Psychological Association, which is our national organization. They do the big studies like that, where they study poll however many youth in this country to find out those numbers. Because we do need to know.
We do need to know. I would say the reason that I had Black Men Read and Black Men Build and the Village Path so focused on Black men and healing is because, I mean, it is true that Black men are the last ones, which means Black youth, male, teens, the last ones to the table of mental well-being, the last ones that we could try to get to admit that you need the help, to actually get the help. And then when we get them to want to get the help, to identify that I need help, then you can't find somebody, which is the story for all of us in America.
And it's really hard. I know when people call my practice to get in services, they're probably dumbfounded. I'm like, oh, we have waiting lists. Of how long? 3 to 6 months.
That's your waiting list.
Yeah. And I know, and the good thing is, though, what I've seen over the past 15 years is it used to be when people would call and look for help or mental health, they will say, oh, I need a therapist. But now Black people are pretty savvy. They'll say, oh, I want a psychologist, or I want someone that specializes in cognitive behavioral, or I want someone who has training in like diversity. So they kind of know what they want, but it doesn't help when the people aren't there. Right,
because that when you become very specific, then those who specialize in that become
not there.
They're not there.
It's just not enough of them. And I tell people all the time, they're like, oh, okay, you can get on my wait list. It'll be about 6 months. They're like, I don't want to wait that long. Okay, you can go out and find somebody, but
they're not going to be culturally.
If you can get in quick, that should tell you something.
Oh, my.
Yeah, if you can get in with them quick in this shortage of mental health providers, that should tell you a lot. They shouldn't have openings if they're good.
Dr. Cooper, I feel like and I've seen this personally, but what we have witnessed for hundreds of years is the impact of trauma, of violence, of racism, of bigotry, systemic racism, structural racism on a people, which has therefore changed our behavior, changed our sense of self, and limited our potential, our ability to achieve our potential.
We have, and it's done a number on us, and we have a long way to go. But I do see the glimmers of hope.
What does hope look like?
Hope looks like to me the rising number of Black people that are seeking therapy.
For sure.
Like the rising number of Gen Z people that, if you go on social media, they're talking about it. They're forming support groups themselves about how to get help, how to peer support each other. I like all that. I think we're going in the right direction. Like schools are doing things. Universities, like Boston University, has developed like a whole peer support network because they realize their students are lacking support, period. So they can get support from peers. So I see glimmers of hope. I see things changing. I'm just not sure it's changing very, very quickly.
There are more people that are seeking the help than there are available to give the help.
Yes.
So as a psychologist with a 6-month waiting list, which tells you how in demand she is, what do you advise us to do in the absence of getting into a therapist tonight? If in fact, because I would like to get back into therapy, just because at 62, I want this next chapter. I want to throw off every bit of baggage that might be trying to hang on to me as I really, really eyeball true retirement. And so many people, a 24-year-old son who's like, I'm trying to find a therapist, right?
It's hard.
And I'm so happy for him that he would want to do that. But in the absence of it,
what do you do?
Are you going to tell me to get out and get into the sunlight? What are you going to tell me to do?
I would say that. Well, sunlight could help. Physical activity helps. But I think if you like search on Amazon or online about good books based on whatever you're struggling with at the time, there are probably some good books out that can help you do that. There are other, if stress or work burnout is an issue,
Okay.
I always recommend to people using the Calm app because they have these different meditations and
I love
mindfulness.
I got the Calm
Yeah,
app.
see, I love it. So those type of things can help you, can help bridge the gap until you can get in the door.
Okay. All right. So read.
Exercise,
Okay.
get enough sleep.
That's why I bought. That's the only reason I bought this watch.
Sleep, it tracks your sleep.
Tracks my sleep.
Hydrate. And mindfulness, meditation, if stress is an issue for you.
Okay. Because clearly we aren't going to be able to get in. Every good psychologist, every great therapist has a waiting list. There aren't enough Black therapists. Who makes for a good therapist? I mean, for those parents watching and their child is, 14, 15, 16, thinking of a career path, who makes for a good therapist? Who makes for a good psychologist?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say people with compassion for sure. It helps. I think a therapist is better if they have more emotional intelligence,
Okay.
meaning that they are aware of themselves and they can read a room and they can tweak it and flex some. They're better therapists. Also, I think people that are more open-minded and flexible make really good therapists. And I say that because I'm probably not the traditional therapist. I'm probably, when I go to conferences and I'm around my peers, I'm like, oh, they're so odd. I would never hang out with some of these people because they're different. They're very rigid, and I'm not. But I think it allows me to, like when I'm working with different types of people, it allows me to see their perspective and kind of step into their life to help them in the ways that I know they can receive it, as opposed to what I would do, like maybe textbook or something. And I know how to develop relationships well with people. That helps. But it also helps me in my forensic work with clients. I can go into the jail setting and talk to inmates and go into the jail and understand their life too. But it helps to be flexible and comfortable in your skin to do that. So I think good therapists are flexible. They're constantly learning. They're open to learning new things, are open to learning from new people. And I think they just have a compassion for people and they want to help. And they want to, like for me, my reason for doing it is really because I like to change the community. I want to see the change happen.
Right, right. And clearly, and I love that you mentioned our ancestors, that we come from powerful stock.
Greatness, yes.
We come from resistance. We come from tenacity. We come to have come through what we have come through. Clearly, we have the ability to navigate and survive and then thrive.
Like
Absolutely.
If we can survive the Middle Passage, good Lord. I mean, like what? It gets no more difficult than that.
Right.
So we have it. We just have to kind of bear down to try hard to get it. And I think we also have to produce and raise children that have that same fortitude. Because it's not going to get life doesn't get easy. No, it gets harder, and you're throwing all these curveballs, and you have to know how to ride the waves and figure it out.
I appreciate you so much. You're going to come back, I know, at some point in time.
Of course I will.
I'm going to have you somewhere somewhere. We are going to do something else together.
Well, I look forward to it.
I appreciate you. Licensed psychologist, and the practice is Emergent Psychological Services in Clayton. And I did not mention this, director of Webster University's psychology program. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad you came on.
Me too. Look, I've loved you from afar for years. I remember watching you on the news. I was like, that's kind of like my auntie for real.
I'll be your auntie for real. I will be your auntie for real. And you can check me.
I won't do that. I would never do that.
We are building community on this podcast. We are absolutely building community, and we know that you want it as well because we all absolutely need it. We need it.
We sure do.
I appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you can call her office, but as she said, there's a 6-month waiting list. But Calm app, exercise,
Sleep.
sleep.
Sleep is big.
Sleep is big. I've decided recently, by the way, Dr. Cooper, that I got this at first really to measure my steps and my sleep. It's Samsung.
Okay.
And to measure my steps. And then I thought, I read something about my sleep and my deep sleep REM, but I didn't know anything about deep sleep. And I'm like, I'm not getting enough deep sleep. So I'm like, forget the steps. I'm going to get this deep sleep in.
Sleep is way more important.
Way more important. So now she's measuring her sleep every day.
Every day.
For sure.
So I hope it got better.
Last night was excellent. The night before that, the watch told me needs attention.
But you can sleep with the watch on.
My husband can't. I
can't either.
I can. I
I
can do
wish.
it. I don't know how. I don't know why. I don't know how. But I really want him to do it because his sleep is worse than mine. But last night it was excellent, and I feel judged by my watch every morning.
I'm amazed. I just don't know how you sleep in it.
I don't know. Put a little oil on your. It won't feel so uncomfortable.
Yeah, oil. But then it's gonna move.
Well, I mean around the strap.
Oh,
so it's not so uncomfortable.
Oh, okay. I
Around the strap part. Try that. I don't know. I don't know what else to tell you. I can sleep.
As long as you're getting better sleep.
Well, some days it's great and some days it's terrible. but I'm focused on it, and that's what we want you to do. To focus on
Sleep is important.
Focus on your mental health, and let's focus on community. We need to come together. We need to really, really come together again. Thank you so much again for joining us on Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this episode. All you have to do is click the subscribe button, click the like button. You can share this podcast as well, and leave us a comment and tell us if you are in need of community. And we've got resources. We're going to link some of the things that Dr. Cooper talked about, the Calm app, link the advice that she gave us, books that you could perhaps read. We'll link that here on our YouTube channel and on our website, 9pbs.org. Thank you again. We appreciate you so much. And we hope that we are bringing to you conversations that matter. That is our goal, to answer the question, how did we get here and what do we need to do to progress? And even who or what is standing in our way. And sometimes the who that is standing in the way is a person looking at you in the mirror. Could be you. So go back, listen to previous podcasts. We have touched on a variety of issues that we feel will help us to build a better community that not only St. Louisans are just surviving, we want to go beyond that at 9PBS to helping more people to, in fact, thrive in their lives. So this is one way to do it, by listening to this podcast. And we're so grateful that you do. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel. We'll be back next week.
For more information about 9PBS's mental well-being initiative, visit 9pbs.org/mental well-being.
Listen St. Louis with Carol Daniel is supported in part by Midwest Bank Center, the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation, and Orvin and Latrice Kimbrough.